Okay, here we are again. Welcome back, everybody. This is the We Quit Booze Brothers, which is a podcast where we try to have honest, no fluff conversations about our various experiences of quitting alcohol. And with me, as always, is my brother Matt. Hello, Matt.
Good morning, Mark. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. We are back. Do you know what I feel every time we start with an apology? But once again, I shall deliver that apology. I've been away on holiday for the last 2 weeks. Mark's in Mallorca, and so we are, very flaky on getting these out on time and regularly. We will try our best to get it done. But hey, I had a great break. It's good to be back. It's given us thought about many topics, and we've got a good one, I think, today. One that Mark came out. In fact, he pointed out that this wasn't AI that generated this idea,
Yeah.
even though it looked like a very AI generated topic. Not that we use it, but it did look it. So, Mark, I'll hand over to you,
Yeah,
and
I have
let's
a
get going.
feeling that like almost everything anybody ever does now, you've got to sort of maybe provide a bit of a disclaimer and say, I didn't
Literally.
use AI for this, honestly, because it just feels like it's everywhere at the moment. A bit like our apologies. In terms of like how the regularity of these, I think just have to look, they come out when they
Bear
come
with
out.
us.
Yeah, we don't have a big production company leaning on us to get these things out on time, so it's when we can do them. But yeah, so look, this one occurred to me just as these things do. Really, you sort of live your life, you wander around in this world, and I quit drinking almost 10 years ago now, so it's been a long time. But I was sort of reflecting on that, and I think there's a lot of content and a lot of talk about quitting alcohol. The process of the sort of decision that you go through, like, is it a problem? Do I drink too much? What is too much? Is it affecting me? You might even be at am I an alcoholic? Do I have a drink problem? All of that. And there's an awful lot of content around that. There's lots of these sorts of podcasts where people talk about being sober and all the rest of it. But what I don't think there's an awful lot of is how do you that so you've got the bit where you quit, you've got the bit where you were drinking, and you've sort of got the bit where you feel, okay, I've done it now, I'm good. But the sort of middle ground, this kind of there is no middle ground. For me, I went from drinking a lot, quite often, most of the time. My drinking habits were I'd drink on a Friday, drink on a Saturday, drink on a Sunday, normally take Monday and Tuesday off. Wednesday was the middle of the week. That was my excuse to have a drink. I used to call it hump day, so it's the middle of the week. Normally have a couple on a Thursday, rinse and repeat. So consequently, I only ever spent 1 or 2 days, where I wasn't, drinking. And quite frankly, I just didn't feel like it on those days. I was tired and I was kind of grumpy and dealing with all the crap and the anxiety. But you go from that to not drinking at all. And I know this is a bit like, well, no shit, Sherlock. That's what quitting means. Like, you don't, like, otherwise it's not quitting. But it's that sort of, how do you manage that transition? How do you start to become comfortable in your kind of new sober skin? And I just feel like there's not loads and loads of detail. And I just wanted to reflect on some of my experiences, and hopefully they'll help. The first thing to say is everything gets better, right? Everything gets better. But there are hoops that you will have to jump through. There are things that will present themselves. Clearly, there will be the pangs. There will be the odd, I really want to drink again. I miss alcohol. Um, One of the big things was you haven't seen somebody for a while. We must get together for a beer. For me, it seemed like everybody said, "Oh, we must get together for a drink." And weirdly, and I think there's probably some deep sort of layered psychological association here that I'm not smart or bright enough to understand. But weirdly for me, one of the biggest things was telling people I didn't drink. I found that hard in the early days. I found that I felt they because the lot because what most people say is, why don't you drink? Did you have a problem? And you would feel that sort of shame. again. You would feel kind of almost like you'd have to. I found myself over explaining. I found and the more I over explained, the more it sounded like. And then you know, all I can, without sort of jumping around too much, all I can tell you is that 10 years down the line, I wear that with a real badge of honor. I can't wait now to tell people I don't drink. Don't feel any shame. Don't feel any embarrassment. Not even a flicker. And if people say, "Did you drink too much?" I say, "Yeah, I drank too much. That's why I quit. You know, I was drinking too much. I was just," and I think it's an interesting dynamic how shame shapes the way we think, the way we interact with people, and your assumptions about what that means. And I've got some thoughts and ideas about what I did, and I'll just wanted to share that today, and hope that it helps because I think it does. And it's about living with a bit of purpose. It's about being a little bit more mindful of the sort of life that you want to live. It's about being not allowing the world. I think a lot of us just get up every day. We just face the day. What's happening today? What have I got to do? And it's like whack-a-mole. It's like you just bash the things down as they pop up, without any real kind of like what's the end game here, like why am I doing all these things? Is your life will just grab hold of you if you're not careful. The combination of your relationships, your work, your family, your friends, these things will start to get their hooks into you, and before you know it, 10, 15, 20 years will drift by, and you sort of go, "Well, hang on, what's happened?" So I think part of what I want to talk about is being sober gives you this incredibly unique opportunity to live a life without that thing that always used to get in the way. It always got in the way for me. I had great intentions. You and I would have conversations all the times about shit that we were going to do, but that thing got in the fucking way all the time. I'd get drunk on the weekend and then feel shit, spend the most of the week sort of trying to get back to normal, and then I'd just go and fucking do it all over again. So that's a bit of a word soup, salad, whatever the term is, but I don't want to dive straight into too much of what I want to say. But it's an interesting topic, it's an interesting dynamic, and it's something that if you're considering this, you will go through it. Trust me, you will go through a lot of these, like, who the fuck am I now that I don't drink? What do you do at the weekends now that I don't drink? How do I interact with people? How do I make friends? Who do I want to make friends with? What am I going to do with my life? And there's quite a lot to it. So I'll stop there. I'll let you say a few bits, Matt, and then maybe we'll sort of come back around.
Yeah, it's interesting. I always have a plan in my head as to what I'm going to talk about, and then you go and throw a curveball, and I change that. But that's the great thing. We do this live. We don't rehearse, and I think that's what we like to do and how we like to do it. So I was just thinking when you were talking there about, you were saying you maybe got 1 or 2 days, good days per week where you weren't drinking because you didn't feel like you wanted to. And I know you weren't drinking. Even when you did, it wasn't necessarily to excess, but there was alcohol involved. When I got back from holiday on Wednesday night, and I had Thursday off, and I went back into work on Friday. Now, I could have taken the Friday off if I'd wanted to, but my view was, and this was kind of I don't know, it just completely different to how I would have run my life when I was drinking. My view was, well, that's great because I can go in on a Friday. It'll be quiet. It's still holiday period here in France. Anybody who's lived or knows, mainland Europe knows that August is just dead. People go on holiday. It's comical almost in France. Things shut down. There's half of the bakeries and hairdressers, etc., all closed. Yeah,
We've
there
noticed
you
it, yeah.
go. So it's a really interesting period. I quite like this period because it means work-wise I'm not getting disturbed and I can get things done, and that's great. So my view was, go into the office on Friday, then at least I can get through those mails that will have built up over the last 2 weeks, so that Monday, which is actually tomorrow, I will walk in without that sort of Monday, not dread because I don't get that anymore, but that Monday sort of, oh my gosh, right, I've got tons to do, let's get through it. Set myself up. 8 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, when I was drinking, completely the other way around, it would have been. It would have been brilliant, right? I can get back from my holiday, and it means I've got 4 days off. I would have taken the Friday off. It means I've got 4 days to drink again. Let's celebrate the end of the holiday. Let's make the most of that. It's Thursday night. Maybe I could go out, get back, see my mates, go out, have a load of drinks. God knows where that would have ended up. Then it's the weekend, so I've got the weekend, and I would have turned up on Monday just fucked, literally, and I would have blamed it. Oh yeah, just got out of holiday. God, it's hard, isn't it, getting back in the routine and all that bullshit. It would have been because I was hungover. I was, in a bad way. So, that's something that is just gone now. It's gone, and I plan, and I wrote down a few things. I was like, what tests you, what do you notice, what things do you look to improve when you stop. Um, what do you notice? You notice that you get time to do other things. You notice other things are important. Things that admin, no one likes admin. No one does. I've had things to sort out. You get them done. They may seem boring, but at least they get done. And also, you get the opportunity to go out. I know that after this call, my wife and I, we're going to go out, go to the market, which is sort of half open, and that'll be nice. Get some coffee. That'll be great. So that's something I think when you go from always drinking to completely sober, you really need to focus on those things. There is a lot to do. There's a lot of fun to have. It isn't a death sentence or meant to be difficult. Um, it did get me thinking, though. There was some news this week. I'm sure you heard it, and there's been a lot of buzz and talk about it, which is Brad Pitt, who has, after 7 years, decided to start drinking again. Now, Brad Pitt does what Brad Pitt wants to do. That's absolutely fine with me. I don't judge anybody. I think anybody who's had 7 years sobriety, it's hugely commendable. I don't care whether you're famous, not famous, whatever. Um, my own personal view is I don't know many people who have the ability to go from always drinking to completely sober back to moderation. Let's see how he gets on. I wish him all the best. I mean, I really do, because there are people out there. We've said this before. Loads of people, my wife, your wife, who can drink in moderation, and I have that one glass. On holiday, my wife would have one glass of wine with her dinner, never more, never wanted more, but she enjoyed that little glass of wine or a cocktail, and that was lovely. So I hope he can go back to that. But it did make me think, were those 7 years spent wishing he could drink again? Were those 7 years because I know, and I see some of the comments from you folks out there who leave us messages saying it's still hard. I think about it every day. And I think with that, then you haven't quite got it right. And actually sometimes, and I really do believe this, and I write this in my book, that slipping up, or people who do go back, is actually the best thing that happens to them, because then they get that realization that, oh no, 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 I this really isn't for me. So we'll see. I don't think Brad Pitt's going to let me know how it's going. Maybe.
Listens to this podcast. I mean, he
Well,
probably,
I imagine he'll leave a comment.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's really interesting. I mean, I think that what I would say to anybody listening to this is, I think if you've been sober for 7 years, you've probably earned the right after 7 years to make. You've earned the right anyway. You're grown ups, make decisions. But don't, I think, for one moment think that, if it's been 50 days or 3 months, that okay, well, I've cracked it now, I can go back. Like Matt said, if you do relapse, that's okay. It's not, that's why these things exist. It's why we're talking about it. It's because it's not black and white. It's not just flick a switch and you quit and you're sober and everything's fine. There's challenges that are associated with that. I think that one of the points that I wanted to make here is that when you are sober, you are experiencing the world in a different way. And, you know, like I said, everything gets better, but there are hoops. Like I said previously, one of the things that always used to catch me out was why don't you drink anymore? What I would recommend is you just come up with a quick script. Don't over explain. Just come up with a brief script. And, you know, one of the answers could be, well, drinking alcohol is really bad for you. And I wanted to see what the world felt like without alcohol. And it turns out for me, it seems much better. But what I did when I quit, and this is a bit of a sort of sober playbook, if you like, in a way, is I think what's useful is for you to think very carefully about what the future version of you looks like. I know this all sounds a bit wanky and a little bit, but bear with me because it's been really, really useful to me. And I do this all the time. I continue to do it. I've been doing it now for over 10 years, which is, you know, the period that I've been sober, and just prior to that, you know, thinking about it. And what I did is so when I quit drinking, I sat down and I wrote a diary entry for 5 years into the future. And I wrote a really, really detailed diary entry. Like I went in incredibly detailed. So, you know, for now, it would be 5 years from now would be 3031. So it's, what's the date today? It's the 16th.
3031. Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, that just sounds horrendous, doesn't it? What
It
a
really
number.
does.
That's only 5 years away.
I know.
Um, but I sort of wrote, I said, you know, my alarm, what time does the alarm go off? I was very specific about that. I wake up at this time. You know, I'm waking up in this house. I described the house I was living in, you know, in quite a lot of detail, actually. I describe you. Who am I? I always make the joke. You know, you can say, "Who do I wake up with?" or "How many do I wake up with?" It's entirely up to you. But
Don't
um,
listen for that.
yeah, you take that away. So, but you know, um, in my diary entry, I said I haven't drunk for 5 years, and I'm really proud of myself for that. Um, I described what I was doing that day. You know, am I working? Am I running my own business? Am I retired? You decide. What does the 5 year version of you look like? How fit am I? You know, am I going to the gym? Do I do things like meditation? Do I have a morning routine? You know, what does my working day consist of? How much money have I got? You know, I wrote that down and I put a number in. What's my net worth look like? What do my debts look like? What cars am I driving? I created this like crystal clear image of what I wanted it to look like. And I didn't just do it once. I did it once, and then I'd reread it a couple of days and think, actually, do I really think that? And I keep coming back to it. And I got really, by doing that, I got really invested in this version of me that I wanted. The other thing that I did, which I realized is, well, that was all fine, but that felt very things oriented. You know, how much money have I got? What sort of house am I in? What I hadn't done is describe the kind of person that I wanted to be. So I also wrote a little mission statement. So okay, that's what I want. I want this house. I want those cars. I want to be living here. I want to be doing these things. But how am I going to show up in this world as I pursue that vision? Am I kind? Am I thoughtful? Do I like to listen more than I talk? Do I try to understand first? Am I reading? Am I, you know? And I described it, and it was quite a long-winded description. And I always remember I watched this not a documentary, sorry, a drama on the BBC called Time. It's fantastic. It's got Sean Bean in it. If you haven't seen it, look it up. It's brilliant. And in one of the phrases, he goes through this big monologue, and at the end of it, he just says, I just want to live a good life. And at the end of my mission statement, I said, maybe that's just it, you know. But so I describe who I'm going to be. I described what I'm going to do. Then what I did is I said, well, okay, so that's what I want in this world. That's what I'd really like to have. That's who I'd like to be. Where am I now? You know, what does right now look like? And the sort of final part, well, not quite the final part, was, so how am I going to get there? You know, what do I need to do? And the incredible thing about being sober is you can do it because nothing gets in the way. And that was one of the biggest like eureka moments for me. Is like, fucking hell, actually, I said that one of the things I was going to do is I was going to get a gym membership. And I've woken up on a Monday morning not putting that off, not thinking I'm not going to do that. I got a gym membership and I started going to the gym. That was in my vision. You know, I go to the gym as the new person, and ironically, I've been going to the gym regularly for 10 years. Um, so you write your strategy for going from where you are now to where you want to be, and the sort of the overriding thing is why the fuck am I doing all of this? Like, why do I want to quit? You know, not I want to quit because it makes. And I went through this layered process of keep re-asking. I kept asking myself the same question over and over and over again, and that's a really interesting process to do in and of itself. So I said, you know, why do I want to stop drinking? Well, it makes me feel shit. Okay, why don't you want to feel shit anymore? Why? What's wrong with feeling shit? Well, I said, okay, interesting one. Well, it gets in the way of, you know, kind of things that I want to do. Okay, so what do you want to do? Oh, that's an interesting question. So I'd like to be doing all this. And why do you want to do those things? And you end up not about 6 or 7 layers in, you end up like, because actually, I want to be the best father to my children that I can be. That's important. I want them to have a role model. You start to create all these reasons for why you want to do stuff. And another thought that I had the other day about all of this is that your ability to create change and to do something different is, I think, directly related to the amount of pain that you're in with the sort of kind of status quo. If you're sort of broadly happy, if things are broadly okay, there's not enough oomph to get you going. But I was sick and tired of drinking. I was sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. I was sick and tired of the anxiety. I was sick and tired of the pounding chest, the beads of sweat, just that sort of the feeling shame after drinking, and that was enough of a reason to do it. So it was a long-winded uh, sort of bit of a diatribe there, but my point is that being sober isn't just a case of I used to drink loads, now I don't. You do have to some extent, take hold of it. You got to grab hold of being sober. You got to make it mean something, and they're the things that I did. And I can tell you that virtually everything I wrote down, everything I described, everything I wanted to do, I'm kind of doing those things. And now I'm doing the next 5 years and trying to figure out what that looks like. And why that's useful is because when things do get a bit shit, and when things do feel a bit off the rails, when things do feel a bit kind of like chaotic, you can open this all up and read it all again and feel reconnect with. So look, we always say that on these, but this is my experience. Right? I'm not. This isn't. This might not work for everybody, but this is how I dealt with it. Because I don't think there's enough content about managing yourself as a sober person. This is how I dealt with it. It was useful for me, and I wanted to share it. So there you go. I'll leave it there.
Really interesting. Yeah, super, super. What you talked about earlier, two things, and I've mentioned this before, and I mentioned it in the book, in my book, Man Get Sober. It's about that return to self. You know, you go back to being you. You know, the you that isn't affected by substances, that isn't doesn't have an unnatural confidence because you've had 4 pints of beer. It doesn't, you have to deal with life as you, as you were born, as you were raised, as you see fit. That's not always easy. It really isn't. But I think what you talk about, actually putting some thought and planning into, what do you want to be? Because and let's be realistic here. You don't need to be famous. You don't need to be living in a fucking chateau. You can have a really nice life just being you.
Sorry to
It
interrupt
might
me, but
seem
one of the
good if
really interesting things for me about that whole process is it turns out I don't want any of those things. Like the things that I love the most are, like you described, a coffee with my wife, going to the market, having a piece of cake because it's a treat.
yeah,
The simple things were what matter the most, and that
yeah,
surfaces
yeah.
when you think about it. Sorry.
I really see that. I really see that with you, and there's certain things that you've done well in with your business, etc. And you could have, and you just like, well, what am I going to do with that? Why would I want that? And I think that really comes from the whole journey you've been through and sobriety, without a doubt, without a doubt. There's There's no question. So, is sober? You go from that always drinking to not. Does it make you perfect? Of course it doesn't. That's something you need to remember. I moan a lot. I still it's just how I am. I the other day I caught myself and I was like, God, you're such an idiot because I bought some new sunglasses before my holiday, and my daughter took a liking to them. So effectively, my new sunglasses became her new sunglasses, and she wore them throughout the holiday. And as we were leaving, I was like, right, I'm gonna put the sunglasses in my bag now so that they come back. Of course, she was like, well, I haven't got them. I was like, what do you mean you haven't got them? Well, I gave them to you. No, you didn't give them to me. And so I'm moaning like, I haven't even looked for them, right? I haven't even looked for them. So I'm moaning, 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 and then my wife goes, they're there. They were literally like 2 meters away. So I'm giving my daughter a hard time, going, you need to take more responsibility. You need to look after things. And they were literally in the room. So, there's all those sort of things. One other thing that maybe I think we should do a podcast on is substitution. So you and I both had not issues because really when you keep drinking, the issues I think afterwards are relatively minor, but certainly sugar was a big one for me. I think I've almost cracked that now, but I think the addict's mind is a strange one, whether you want to call it addict or problem, whatever. I think we all have a sort of addictive personality in many ways, whether it be sport, work, sugar, booze, so we do as a group of people have tendencies to move from one thing to another. So let's maybe talk about that. But I think we've probably covered everything today. We even talked about Brad Pitt. How about that? So yeah, let's end it there. I'll hand back to you, Mark, unless you've got anything you want to add.
No, all good. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate you listening. Do all the things, leave us comments, do the shares. The channel is building very slowly, but that's fine. As long as we can, we do
Yeah,
that.
let's get to 1,000 subscribers. I know we can do it. Come on, we're so
Yeah,
nearly there.
that'll be good. That'll be good. There you go. So, but no. So, cool. Well, we'll leave it there. As I always say, never quit quitting. It's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from him. Cheers. Till the next time.
Bye bye.